The sound of shattering glass echoed through the Texas saloon as Violet Grayson slammed her empty whiskey tumbler on the counter, her emerald eyes flashing with defiance. The year was 1876, and this 22-year-old woman had just buried her father, the last of her family, leaving her with nothing but a mountain of debt and a crumbling ranch on the outskirts of Cottonwood Springs. "Another," she demanded, her voice hoarse from crying. The bartender hesitated. "Miss Grayson, perhaps you ought to head home. It's getting late and I said another," Violet insisted, sliding her last coin across the polished wood. "The ranch isn't home anymore. Tomorrow the bank takes everything." A calloused hand appeared beside hers, placing a silver dollar on the counter. "The lady will have water instead, and so will I." Violet turned, ready to unleash her fury on the interloper, but the words died on her lips. Standing beside her was a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark blonde hair fell in waves beneath a well-worn Stetson, and despite the layer of trail dust on his denim shirt and leather vest, there was something undeniably gentle about him. "Owen Kincaid," he said, tipping his hat. "And I don't believe getting drunk will solve your problems, Miss Grayson." Violet narrowed her eyes. "How do you know my name, small town?" he replied with a shrug. "And I've been looking for you." The bartender placed 2 glasses of water before them. Violet ignored hers, suspicion replacing her earlier despair. "Looking for me? Why?" Owen took a sip of water before answering. "I knew your father, rode with him during the war, saved each other's lives more than once. When I heard about his passing, I came to pay my respects." "You're too late for the funeral," Violet said flatly. "I know, I'm sorry for that." His eyes showed genuine regret. "But I'm hoping I'm not too late to help his daughter." Violet laughed bitterly. "Unless you've got $5,000 to save my ranch from foreclosure, there's nothing you can do." Owen's expression remained serious. "I don't have that kind of money, no, but I have something else. A proposition." "I'm not interested in becoming some cowboys. It's not what you're thinking," he interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "I have a cattle drive headed north to Wyoming. Good money waiting at the end. I need a cook, and I heard you're one of the best in the county." Violet stared at him in disbelief. "You want to hire me as a cook? For a cattle drive?" "Yes, madam. It's hard work, but it pays well, enough that you might be able to start fresh somewhere new." She studied him carefully, trying to detect any deceit. "Why would you offer this to a stranger?" "Like I said, your father was my friend, and—" Owen hesitated, a flash of something vulnerable crossing his features. "And I know what it's like to lose everything." Before Violet could respond, the saloon doors burst open. 3 men entered, led by Harrison Webb, the bank manager who'd foreclosed on her property. "Well, well," Webb sneered, approaching their table. "If it isn't Miss Grayson drowning her sorrows, come to beg for an extension." Violet stiffened. "I don't beg, Mr. Webb. No." "Maybe you should start. Might be the only skill you'll need now that you're penniless." His gaze slid over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Owen stood slowly, his relaxed posture belying the sudden tension in his shoulders. "The lady and I were having a private conversation." Webb's eyes narrowed. "And who might you be?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate your tone," Owen replied evenly. "I suggest you move along." Webb glanced at his companions, then back at Owen, measuring the threat. Something in the cowboy's steady gaze must have convinced him this wasn't a fight worth having. "Enjoy your charity case, stranger," Webb spat, before retreating with his cronies to a corner table. Owen sat back down, seemingly unfazed by the encounter. "So, about my offer." Violet took a deep breath. What choice did she have? Tomorrow she would be homeless, with no family and nowhere to go. This stranger, this friend of her father's, was offering her a chance, slim as it might be. "When do we leave?" she asked. A hint of a smile touched Owen's lips. "Dawn." "Pack light." The cattle drive began the next morning with 1,500 head of longhorns, 8 cowboys, and 1 reluctant cook. Violet had spent her life on a ranch, but she'd never participated in a drive before. The work was exhausting, rising before dawn to prepare breakfast, packing up the chuck wagon, traveling ahead of the herd to set up the midday meal, then doing it all again for dinner. By the end of the first week, her hands were blistered, her back ached constantly, and she was covered in a fine layer of dust that seemed impossible to wash away. But she refused to complain. Every night she collapsed into her bedroll beneath the vast Texas sky, too tired even to dream. Owen kept his distance during those early days, professional and polite but never familiar. He ran the drive with quiet efficiency, earning the respect of his men through competence rather than fear. Occasionally, Violet would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher before he'd turn away, barking orders or riding off to check the herd. It was during the third week that everything changed. A spring storm blew in without warning, turning the trail to mud and spooking the cattle. Violet was struggling to secure the chuck wagon when lightning struck a nearby tree, sending the horses into a panic. The wagon lurched forward and she lost her footing, tumbling down a muddy embankment toward the swollen creek below. Strong arms caught her just before she hit the water. Owen pulled her against his chest, shielding her from the driving rain with his body. "Are you hurt?" He shouted over the storm. She shook her head, too shaken to speak, clutching his soaked shirt. He carried her to a small outcropping of rock that provided minimal shelter, setting her down carefully. "Stay here," he ordered. "I need to help with the herd." "The wagon," she began. "Forget the wagon. We can replace pots and pans. We can't replace you." The intensity in his eyes startled her, and for the first time she saw behind his composed exterior to the man beneath a man who cared more than he let on. Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the rain and chaos. Hours later, when the storm had passed and the damage assessed, Violet found Owen tending to an injured steer. His shirt was torn, a deep cut ran along his forearm, and exhaustion lined his face. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him with clean bandages she'd salvaged from the wagon. "It's nothing," he replied, but he didn't resist when she took his arm and began cleaning the wound. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saving me." Owen's eyes met hers. "I made a promise to your father before he died." Violet's hands stilled. "What promise?" "He wrote to me months ago when he first got sick, asked me to look out for you if anything happened to him." Owen looked away. "I was too late to help him, but I got there in time for you." "So this cattle drive, offering me work, it was all because of a promise." "It started that way," he admitted. "But now?" "Now what?" Instead of answering, Owen gently pulled his arm away and stood. "We lost some cattle in the storm. I need to count the herd before dark." Violet watched him walk away, confusion and a strange disappointment mixing in her chest. That night, she couldn't sleep, replaying their conversation in her mind. Owen had offered her a chance not out of kindness but obligation. Yet the way he'd looked at her, held her during the storm, that hadn't felt like duty. The next morning she approached him as he saddled his horse. "I want to learn to ride," she announced. Owen paused. "You already know how to ride." "Not side saddle on my father's gentle mare." "I want to learn to ride like you do to help with the herd." He studied her for a long moment. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of just being the cook. Because I want to earn my keep fully. Because—" She straightened her shoulders. "Because I need to know if I can do this on my own, build a new life once the drive is over." Something shifted in Owen's expression, respect, perhaps, or understanding. "All right, we'll start today." The riding lessons became a daily ritual. Owen was a patient teacher, and Violet proved to be a natural once she abandoned the constraints of ladylike riding. With each passing day, she grew more confident in the saddle, eventually joining the cowboys in simple herding tasks. As they moved north through Indian Territory, the landscape changed from the familiar Texas plains to rolling hills and deeper rivers. The days grew longer, and so did the conversations around the campfire. Violet learned that Owen had fought for the Confederacy like her father, had lost his family farm in Georgia after the war, and had spent the years since working his way west, drive by drive, building a reputation and saving every dollar. What will you do after we reach Wyoming? She asked one evening as they sat apart from the others, watching the stars emerge above the darkening prairie. I've got land there, Owen replied. Nothing much, yet a small cabin, some fenced pasture, but good water rights and room to grow. You're going to start your own ranch, he nodded. That's the plan. Been working toward it for 5 years now. Alone? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Owen's gaze shifted to her face, lingering there. That was the plan, he said softly. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibilities. Violet's heart raced as he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with calloused fingers that somehow felt impossibly gentle. "Violet," he began, his voice rough with emotion. A shout from the herd interrupted them. One of the cowboys was calling for Owen. A steer had gotten stuck in mud near the river. The moment shattered, and Owen rose quickly to his feet. "We'll talk later," he promised before striding away, but later proved elusive. The next day brought new challenges when they encountered a party of Comanche warriors near their traditional hunting grounds. Though the tribe was now officially confined to reservations, small bands still roamed freely, and tensions remained high between settlers and natives. Owen rode out to meet the Comanche leader, speaking with him in a mixture of broken Spanish and hand signals. Violet watched anxiously from the chuck wagon, rifle in hand, though she prayed she wouldn't need to use it. After what seemed like hours, Owen returned. "They're letting us pass through, but we need to pay a toll. 10 head of cattle. Can we trust them?" asked one of the cowboys, hand hovering near his pistol. "We don't have much choice," Owen replied. "And yes, I believe we can." Their leader, Running Elk, gave his word. "They're hungry, not looking for trouble." The exchange went peacefully, but the encounter left everyone on edge. That night they doubled the watch, and Owen was too busy ensuring their safety to continue any personal conversations with Violet. It was 2 days later when disaster struck. They were crossing a river that had seemed fordable, but recent rains had left the middle section deeper than anticipated. The cattle balked halfway across, and in the ensuing confusion, the current caught the chuck wagon. Violet was trapped inside as the wagon overturned. The cold water shocked her system as she fought to escape, but her skirts tangled around her legs, dragging her down. Panic seized her lungs as the river closed over her head, then strong hands were gripping her waist, pulling her upward. She broke the surface with a desperate gasp, clinging to Owen as he swam them both to shore. They collapsed on the muddy bank, coughing and trembling. "Don't you dare die on me," Owen rasped, gathering her closer. "Don't you dare." "I'm all right," she managed between breaths. "I'm all right." His hands framed her face, blue eyes searching hers with naked fear and something much deeper. "I can't lose you. I can't." And then he was kissing her, desperate and tender all at once, as if she were the air he needed to breathe. Violet responded without hesitation, her arms winding around his neck, anchoring herself to him in a way that had nothing to do with the river's pull. When they finally broke apart, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "God help me, I've tried not to, but I love you, Violet Grayson." "Why would you try not to?" she asked, her voice small. "Because I have nothing to offer you. A half-built cabin in Wyoming, years of hard work ahead." His laugh was bitter. "Your father wanted me to protect you, not fall in love with you." Violet pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. "My father wanted me to be happy and safe, and I've never felt both those things as strongly as I do when I'm with you." Hope kindled in his eyes. "Violet, I love you too," she said simply. "And I don't care about a fancy house or an easy life. I care about building something that matters with someone who matters." The drive continued north, but everything had changed. Though they maintained propriety in front of the men, stolen moments and meaningful glances made every day's journey sweeter. They planned for a future together, talking late into the night about the ranch they would build, the life they would share. "I can't give you the family you lost," Owen said one evening as they sat by the fire, his arm around her shoulders. "But I promise you, Violet, we'll create our own. Children, a home, everything." She leaned into him, content. "Love is enough to start with, the rest will come." But their newfound happiness was threatened when they reached the town of Bent Creek, just south of the Wyoming border. While restocking supplies, Violet encountered a woman from her past, Eleanor Whitfield, a childhood friend whose family had moved north years before. Violet Grayson. "I heard about your father's passing, such a tragedy, and now you're cooking for cowboys." Eleanor's perfectly arched eyebrows rose as she took in Violet's practical, worn clothing. "I'm part of a cattle drive," Violet replied, chin lifting. "We're headed to Wyoming, alone, with no chaperone." Eleanor's scandalized tone drew attention from nearby shoppers. "What would your mother say?" Before Violet could respond, Eleanor continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, my brother James is the mayor now. He's a widower, looking for a suitable wife. I could arrange an introduction, save you from this." She gestured vaguely at Violet's appearance. "I don't need saving, Eleanor. Don't be proud, Violet. A woman alone in this world needs protection, position. Love is a luxury for the secure." The words struck deeper than Violet wanted to admit. She and Owen had spoken of love, of family, but nothing official had been decided. No proposal had been made. What if Eleanor was right? What if love alone wasn't enough? That evening she was uncharacteristically quiet as they made camp outside town. Owen noticed immediately, finding her alone by the chuck wagon. "What happened in town?" he asked gently. Violet hesitated, then shared her encounter with Eleanor and the doubts it had raised. "She made me realize how uncertain everything is. We talk about Wyoming, about the future, but I haven't properly asked you to be part of it," Owen finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're right, I've been a coward." "That's not what I meant, it's the truth all the same." He took her hands in his. "I've been afraid that when we reach Wyoming and you see how little I have, you'll regret your choice, that you'll wish for the life you could have had." "Owen, let me finish." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "I was going to wait until we reached the ranch, until I could offer you more than promises. But I see now that was wrong." To her astonishment, he lowered himself to one knee in the dirt, still holding her hands. "Violet Grayson, I have no ring to give you yet, no fine house, no fortune. But I have my heart, my hands, and my word. I will spend every day of my life building a home and a family with you if you'll have me. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision as she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Owen stood, lifting her off her feet as he kissed her, both of them laughing and crying at once. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, I'll marry you." The next morning, they rode into town together and were married by the local minister, with the cattle drive crew as witnesses. It wasn't the grand wedding Violet might have once imagined. But as Owen slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, purchased with money he'd been saving for cattle, she couldn't imagine wanting anything more. They reached Wyoming 2 weeks later, driving the cattle into the stockyards at Cheyenne to collect their payment. The trail boss paid Violet her wages separately, treating her with the respect she'd earned over the long journey. "What will you do now, Mrs. Kincaid?" he asked as he handed her the money. The name still sent a thrill through her. "My husband and I have a ranch to build," she replied proudly. The Kincaid Ranch was indeed modest, a one-room cabin on a plot of land nestled between rolling hills, with a creek running along its eastern border. But to Violet, it was perfect. The first night they spent there as husband and wife, Owen carried her across the threshold, set her down gently, and showed her the improvements he'd already made in anticipation of her arrival. "I built this shelf for your books," he said, running his hand along the smooth pine board. "And I thought we could put a garden here come spring." He pointed out the window to a sunny patch of earth. "The bedroom." He hesitated, suddenly shy despite their married status. "Well, it needs a proper bed. We'll get one in town next week." Violet wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. "It's wonderful, all of it." That first year was harder than either had anticipated. Wyoming winters were brutal, far colder than Texas. Their small herd of cattle, purchased with the combined earnings from the drive, suffered losses from wolves and harsh weather. Supplies ran low by February, and they survived on dried beans and hope until the spring thaw, but they endured together. Violet learned to hunt alongside Owen to mend fences and birth calves. He taught himself carpentry, expanding their cabin room by room. By their first anniversary, they had a proper kitchen, a cozy bedroom, and the beginnings of a nursery necessary now that Violet was expecting their first child. "Are you happy?" Owen asked one evening as they sat on the porch he'd built, watching the sunset paint the hills gold. His hand rested protectively on her swollen belly where their child kicked energetically. Violet considered the question seriously. They weren't rich by any measure. The ranch demanded constant work and luxuries were few, but each night they fell asleep in each other's arms, secure in their love and shared purpose. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" His smile was answer enough, but he elaborated anyway. "I promised you a family, Violet, but you gave me one first. You and this little one." He bent to press a kiss to her stomach. "And maybe a few more down the road," she laughed, running her fingers through his hair. "Let's see how we manage with this one first." Their daughter, Catherine, was born as spring bloomed across the ranch. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination, howling lustily as she entered the world in their bedroom with only a neighboring rancher's wife serving as midwife. Owen held his daughter with trembling hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered, placing her gently in Violet's arms, "just like her mother." The years that followed brought growth to both family and ranch. A son, Benjamin, joined them 2 years after Catherine. The cattle herd expanded, and Owen's careful management began to pay off. They added a proper barn, hired hands during busy seasons, and even brought in a prize bull that improved their stock dramatically. 5 years after their arrival in Wyoming, they hosted their first real Christmas celebration in a home that now boasted 4 bedrooms, a separate dining room, and a stone fireplace that kept the winter chill at bay. As neighbors and friends filled their house with laughter and music, Violet found Owen standing alone by the window, watching the snow fall. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her arm through his. "The day we met," he replied, drawing her close. "You were so angry, so broken." "I was so afraid I couldn't help you." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You did more than help me, you saved me." Owen shook his head. "No, love, we saved each other." From across the room, Catherine called for her father to help with a game, while baby Rose, their newest addition, fussed in her cradle. Benjamin was already there, trying to explain the rules to the younger children with all the authority his 4 years could muster. "Our family," Violet murmured contentedly. Owen kissed her temple. "Just as I promised." "And you were right," she added. "Love was enough, it was always enough." As they rejoined the celebration, surrounded by the family they had created together, Violet thought about the journey that had brought them here from a desperate meeting in a Texas saloon to this moment of perfect fulfillment. There had been hardships aplenty, but never doubt, never regret. Owen caught her eye across the room and smiled, the same smile that had captured her heart all those years ago. In that smile, she saw everything their past, their present, and a future still unfolding before them, built on nothing more complicated than a cowboy's promise and the enduring power of love.